This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 14th, 2017. We are live here inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, awaiting the capture of the Cygnus cargo vehicle for Orbital ATK's OA-8 mission. Right now, the Cygnus cargo vehicle is just about 1.5 kilometers away from the International Space Station and approaching. It just initiated its third burn to approach the International Space Station, what's called the approach initiation burn. Still a little bit out of view, but coming towards the International Space Station for a capture time scheduled now at 3:50 a.m. Central Time. On board is 7,400 pounds of food, supplies, and experiments to be delivered to the Expedition 53 crew aboard the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control Houston, leading the teams today, Flight Director T.J. Creamer, and next to him, Capcom Kathy Bolt, who will be communicating with the crew aboard the International Space Station. Up in the robotic workstation in the cupola of the International Space Station is Flight Engineer Paolo Nespoli, working hand-in-hand with Randy Bresnik at the helms of the controls for the station's robotic arm that they will use to capture Cygnus today, once within range, again 3:50 a.m. Central Time. They'll be working mission control teams here today in Houston will be working with Orbital ATK's flight control team in Dulles, Virginia, led by Mission Director Tony Foti. The visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control Houston, Jerry Yancheris, will be talking with NASA officials in Virginia and relaying vehicle status and updates to the flight director here in Mission Control Houston. Again, Cygnus is on its way to the International Space Station, just about to approach about 1 kilometer away from the International Space Station. Right now, from this view, you can see the tiny dot just about the top, maybe a little bit left of the center of the screen. Again, that is Cygnus just over 1 kilometer away, about 1,100 meters right now. This is just a less than 2-day rendezvous that we're looking at today. Again, capture at 3:50 a.m. Central Time after launching 2 days ago on Sunday, November 12th. At 6:19 a.m. Central Time on top of Orbital ATK's Antares 230 rocket, the Cygnus cargo vehicle lifted off from Pad 0A at Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. Just about an hour and a half later, after that launch, again 6:19 a.m. Central Time, solar arrays deployed, and it began its journey to the International Space Station. Its less than 2-day journey, again carrying 7,400 pounds of food, supplies, and experiments to the International Space Station. Orbital ATK now just crossed 1,000 meters from the International Space Station, again towards its approach for a 3:50 a.m. capture today. The spacecraft itself is called the SS Gene Cernan, named after the commander of Apollo 17, who passed away earlier this year in January 2017.
And Station Houston on 2, Cygnus range is 1,000 meters. Monitor long-range approach for Step 1 and 1.102.
Just Step 1 of 1.102 in work. Thank you.
Again, Capcom Kathy Bolt here in Mission Control Houston, working with the robotic arm operators for today that will be using the station's robotic arm to capture the Cygnus vehicle once it gets into its capture position, just a few meters away from the International Space Station. That again is Paolo Nespoli at the helm of the control for the Cupola workstation that will be using the station's robotic arm. He's working with NASA astronaut Randy Bresnik.
Step 1, we confirm we have Cygnus inside, monitor and prime range, and at PCS, ACP, everything looks normal.
We copy. Good news.
So far, good words from the crew aboard the International Space Station. Everything looking nominal for this approach. Again, Cygnus inside the 1 kilometer mark, about 1,000 meters away from station. Now actually just crossing the 850 meter mark. The next step on the agenda is one more burn that will bring it to its 250 meter holding point. That's just after the 1,000 meter holding point. We'll wait for that word here soon. Now in view is the Cygnus cargo craft. You can start seeing the solar arrays at the side. You see the back left there. Those are those ultraflex solar arrays on Cygnus, again about 800 meters away from station. Again, this is the inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Visiting Vehicle Officer Jerry Ancheris now inside of the bottom right of your screen. He is talking with NASA officials over in Dulles, Virginia, relating vehicle status and updates to the flight director. Again, leading the team over there, correction from earlier, Mission Director Ken Peake leading the flight control team in Dulles, Virginia. Here in Mission Control Houston, Flight Director TJ Creamer leading the teams here, Capcom Kathy Bolt right next to him there, a little bit towards the middle of your screen, relaying the information from the teams here in Mission Control Houston to our 2 robotic arm operators aboard the International Space Station, Paolo Nespoli and Randy Bresnik of Expedition 53. Inside 700 meters away from Station Cygnus, approaching the International Space Station, again named after Gene Cernan, the commander of Apollo 17, famous Apollo 17, and along with 2 other missions. One of them being the Gemini 9 mission, which he was on that mission, they on June 3rd, 1966, achieved the circular orbit of 161 statute miles. Used 3 different techniques to practice rendezvousing in space. They were rendezvousing with something called the Augmented Target Docking Adapter. And also on that mission, Cernan was the 2nd American to walk in space after Ed White just a year earlier in 1965. His next mission, Apollo 10, he did everything but land on the moon as the lunar pilot. On that mission, actually went down in the lunar vehicle to about 8 nautical miles from the surface and lifted back up to test those procedures and get ready for the famous Apollo 11 mission where Neil Armstrong successfully landed on the moon in 1969. Cernan was one of the few astronauts to go to the moon twice. The second time, he was the commander of that mission. You can see at the bottom of your screen, Apollo 17. Again, Cernan passed away earlier this year in January 2017. This mission, Orbital ATK's OA-8 mission, named after him, the SS Gene Cernan. Cygnus inside 600 meters away from the station, a rate of about just under 1 meter per second, approaching the International Space Station, about 565 meters right now. Cygnus is now about 500 meters away from the International Space Station, moving quickly, actually just about a half a meter per second at this point right now. Cygnus has about 250 meters more to go to the next checkpoint. Right at about 250 meters, it will begin its first hold point. Teams here will assess whether or not to move a little bit closer to the 30-meter hold point. Again, 250 meters more to go. Cygnus now in the daylight, about 263 statute miles is the International Space Station at the South Indian Ocean right now. Already passing the 450-meter mark and approaching the International Space Station at about 0.4 meters per second. Slowing down a bit to get to that 250-meter holding point. Again, on board Cygnus is 7,400 pounds of experiments, food, and supplies for the crew of Expedition 53 aboard the International Space Station. Many scientific experiments on board, some including studies into antibiotic resistance, high-speed data transmission, plant growth, and even improved power and communication technologies. One of them is the E. coli antimicrobial satellite. This mission will investigate microgravity's effect on the antibiotic resistance of E. coli, a bacterial pathogen responsible for urinary tract infections in humans and animals. Antibiotic resistance could pose a danger to astronauts, especially since microgravity has been shown to weaken the human immune system. This experiment will expose 2 strains of E. coli to 2 different doses of antibiotics. Results from this investigation could help determine appropriate antibiotic dosages to protect astronaut health during long-duration missions and help us understand how antibiotic effectiveness may change as a function of stress on Earth. Lots of other great studies aboard the Cygnus cargo craft, many including different satellites. One of them is called the Integrated Solar Array, short for ISARA. It's a hybrid solar power panel and communications solar antenna that can be send and receive data messages. It's tested to be used in the technology of a CubeSat-based environment for monitoring. ISARA, this is the name of the mission, may provide a solution for sending and receiving information to and from faraway destinations, both here and on Earth. That last satellite you were seeing, though, was the E. coli antimicrobial satellite that will be testing those different antibiotics against the strain of E. coli. Cygnus now inside 400 meters away from station, just about 375 right now, crossing that mark. Again, heading towards that 250 meter holding point at a rate of just under 0.4 meters per second. Cygnus now passing the 350 meter mark away from the International Space Station, still over the South Indian Ocean, 264 statute miles above the Earth right now is the International Space Station looking down on the spacecraft. The trajectory now turning towards a northeasterly direction to about to cross the southwestern portion of Australia into the terminator line and start entering an orbital nighttime. During this broadcast, the Cygnus vehicle and the International Space Station will go into an orbital sunset. There, the Cygnus will be holding at the 250 meter point and depart to get to that 30 meter holding point over the course of half an orbit, about 90 minutes to get back into the sunlight. Cygnus capture will occur during daylight so that ground control teams can monitor the progress of Cygnus approaching the International Space Station and its capture with the benefit of the illumination of the sun. Capture point again, 3:50 a.m. Central Time today. After the Cygnus vehicle is captured today, we'll go off air and come back at around 5:15 a.m. Central Time to start the installation coverage. The crew themselves will help to install the Cygnus by performing a few leak checks later in the day. However, they will not ingress the vehicle until the early hours of Central Time of tomorrow. Inside again are 7,400 pounds of experiments, food, and supplies. Lots of great studies on board OA-8. One of them is the biological nitrogen fixation in microgravity via legume symbiosis. It's the study of the microclovers, which have a unique ability to convert nitrogen into nutrients. Nitrogen, of course, being the bulk of the makeup of Earth's atmosphere, as well as the International Space Station, and providing a similar environment for the astronauts. Studying them in microgravity will allow researchers to investigate what types of living organisms and can grow best in the microgravity environment, and how the plant nutrients responds in the unique environment of space. Less than 50 meters to go to the 250-meter holding point. Great views of the Cygnus cargo vehicle as the International Space Station is just south of Australia right now, 263 statute miles above the Earth.
In the station on Space to Ground 2, do you mind if I start the equipment gather for the ITCS sampling and maintenance canister installation early?
You have a go to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Less than 25 meters to go for the Cygnus cargo craft to reach the 250-meter holding point. At this point, all of the approach burns have been conducted. Again, that was to get to that 250-meter holding point. There'll be a few check marks along the way to get into its capture position. One is the 250-meter mark, the other being 30 meters. Once at the 250-meter holding point, we will be crossing into the orbital nighttime. There, they will ground teams will assess the 250-meter holding point, see if everything's good, and then get to that next check mark at 30 meters. From 30 meters, it will move into its capture position, where again, Paolo Nespoli aboard the International Space Station, working hand in hand with Randy Bresnik at the Cupola workstation, will use the station's robotic arm to grab Cygnus, and from there, ground teams will take over the robotic arm controls to move it into its installation position. Less than 10 meters to go to get to the 250-meter holding point. You can start seeing the outline of the southern part of Australia, the International Space Station, just about 260 statute miles above the Earth, now passing right over Melbourne, Australia. In just a few minutes, the station and Cygnus will enter an orbital nighttime. And from there, the Cygnus will be at the 250-meter holding point. Ground team's already talking about assessing that point to start approaching to the next check mark at the 30-meter holding point. Right in between there is 200 meters. This is what's called the keep-out sphere. Within this realm, once it crosses the astronauts in the cupola workstation right now, again, Paolo Nespoli and Randy Bresnik will be able to issue an abort command just in case anything goes wrong within that range. About 4 meters to go to that 250-meter holding point. You can start seeing the darkness of the night side of the Earth now starting to take over as we cross into an orbital nighttime in the International Space Station, now just east off the coast of Australia, where Sydney is right now. 259 statute miles above the Earth is the International Space Station, looking down at the Cygnus cargo craft just about 250 meters away. Again, that holding point coming up soon.
And Station Houston on 2, Cygnus has arrived at the 250-meter hold point. We're going to need a few minutes to transition Cygnus to LiDAR navigation, and then we'll give you a call to perform Step 2 once that is complete.
Station copy, stand by.
Confirmation from the Capcom Kathy Bolt, relaying information to the crew aboard the International Space Station. Paolo Nespoli confirming that call. Cygnus now at the 250-meter holding point. Station is 258 statute miles above the Earth, just east of Australia over the Pacific Ocean. Now crossing the terminator line into orbital darkness, yet still illuminated by the sun. You can see the outline of Cygnus from this view, and the solar arrays at the bottom still illuminated by the sun. Ground teams here will assess the 250-meter holding point. If everything is go, they'll start approaching the International Space Station once again, slowly but surely, to the 30-meter holding point. great view of the Cygnus cargo vehicle, the OA-8 mission, holding at about 250 meters away from the International Space Station as it crosses just east of Australia into the orbital nighttime, yet still illuminated by the sun. The International Space Station 257 statute miles above the Earth right now. Ground teams currently assessing the 250-meter holding point, getting ready to depart and start approaching the International Space Station to the next check mark at 30 meters. Inside is 7,400 pounds of food, supplies, and experiments, awaiting for a capture time today at just about 3:50 a.m. Central Time. Right now you're getting a view of the what's called the Cuckoo workstation. This is the workstation being projected from, this is the same view that the astronauts have aboard the International Space Station, relaying telemetry of Cygnus to the astronauts and working hand in hand with the ground teams here. The important number to note on the right side of the screen is primary number VV to ISS. See, it's holding at 251. That's where it's holding right now, just over the 250-meter mark, as ground teams are continuing to assess whether to depart. From there, you'll see it decrease, and the range and rate will increase as it begins to approach to the 30-meter holding point. The International Space Station, 255 statute miles above the Earth. Astronauts going back and forth through the International Space Station, working on various tasks, mostly right now monitoring the approach of the Cygnus cargo vehicle on its OA-8 mission, scheduled again for 3:50 a.m. capture time. International Space Station just east of Papua New Guinea and about northeast of Australia on a northeasterly course. Still on the orbital nighttime, you can see the light illuminating Cygnus, and some of the solar panels and equipment on the outside of the International Space Station have disappeared now, completely in an orbital nighttime. During the orbital nighttime, ground teams will assess whether to depart the 250-meter holding point. A full room today here in Mission Control Houston. Teams working on the capture of the Cygnus cargo vehicle today. Leading the teams today, back behind me actually, is the flight director TJ Creamer, formerly an astronaut, now flight director, working hand in hand with the Capcom Kathy Bolt. We are all communicating with Ken Peak, over the mission director over in Dulles, Virginia. They're working with visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control, Jerry Yancheris, communicating some of the data and updates of the Cygnus cargo craft as it approaches the International Space Station. Again, about 7,400 pounds of supplies and experiments aboard the International Space Station. We've gone through a few of them, some of them being studies on antibiotic resistance and even plant growth, as well as a few CubeSats. For now, teams here in Mission Control assessing the 250-meter hold point, whether or not to depart and start approaching the International Space Station once again. So right in the middle of your screen, visiting vehicle officer Jerry Yancheris. He's the one communicating with the flight control team over in Dulles, Virginia. Ken Peake is the mission director over there, working with the flight control teams, leading the Orbital ATK OA-8 mission. The team there responsible for the flight of Orbital ATK's Cygnus mission after launch, completely in their hands up to about the joint operations of today's activities. That team now working hand in hand with flight control teams here in Houston, here at the NASA Johnson Space Center, for the joint operations of the capture of today's vehicle. Again, a lot of great experiments aboard this Cygnus cargo craft that's sitting 250 meters away right now. One of them is the Optical Communications and Sensor Demonstration Project. This project will study high-speed optical transmission of data and small spacecraft proximity operations. Basically, it will use lasers to communicate using CubeSats to provide a compact version of the technology. Results from this study could lead to significantly enhanced communication speeds between space and Earth, and a better understanding of laser communication between small satellites in low Earth orbit. The International Space Station has been a great place for companies to send small satellites and deploy them. There's actually a segment on the International Space Station on the outside of the Japanese module. Small satellites can be sent through a small airlock and actually launched from there, from the International Space Station. Sending these small satellites and putting them in a cargo vehicle like Cygnus, now that you can see illuminated with green and red lights sitting 250 meters away. It's a great place to deliver these small satellites and mitigate some of that cost rather than just launching these satellites straight up from a rocket. Cygnus now departing the 250-meter holding point as the International Space Station flies 252 statute miles over the middle of the Pacific Ocean right now on its way towards the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2. Cygnus has transitioned to LiDAR for navigation, so you can perform Step 2 and confirm Cygnus 250-meter hold for Step 2 and 1.102.
Houston, station copies. Step 2.
Apologies, still sitting at the 250-meter holding point, not departed quite yet. The range and rate you can see at the right side of the Cuckoo workstation from this view right here, still holding at about 250 meters.
The abort LED arm light is illuminated. We have LiDAR lock, command path, and prox available illuminated, and the strobe light illuminated.
We copy all.
Frame counter is incrementing. Prior range is 251.23.
We copy.
And block Bravo using camera 9. The light is within the corridor. The vehicle size, we can't really tell at this point, but before we went into dark, it was approximately the same size as the overlay. The light appears to be offset about half a vehicle width forward of the circle, and the circle is offset one vehicle width starboard and of the center line.
And we copy all on the block Bravo.
So at the 250-meter holding point, you're hearing Randy Bresnik aboard the International Space Station right now, relaying some of the telemetry data that he's seeing from this view right now, whether the Cygnus cargo craft is lining up in that crosshairs right there, relaying them down to ground teams here in Mission Control Houston so they can work through whether or not to depart that 250-meter holding point.
And Station Houston on 2 for Paulo or Comrade. If you could give us the light offset and circle offset based off of the camera view S1 lower outboard, we would appreciate that.
Houston Station on 2, Step 4, Cold Command disarmed.
Copy, we're checking. And on 2, the PCS HCP command checkout was successful. Begin monitoring approach from 250 meters per step 5.
Station copies. We'll give you a block Bravo at 150 meters unless you want one sooner.
150 works for us.
So the Cygnus vehicle is on its way to the International Space Station, departing the 250-meter holding point. Now at about 190 meters away from the station.
And station on 2, Cygnus is inside the 200-meter keep-out sphere. Crew now has the authority to issue an abort if no comm with MCC Houston, and the light is outside the corridor.
Station copies.
So the Cygnus cargo vehicle has crossed into what's called the keep-out sphere. This is inside the 200-meter sort of sphere that encompasses the International Space Station. Within that range, the crew aboard the International Space Station, again, Paolo Nespoli and Randy Bresnik, working on the approach of the Cygnus cargo vehicle. They have the ability to issue an abort command if necessary. They actually have communication with the Cygnus cargo vehicle. Now 165 meters and closing on the International Space Station at a rate of about 0.2 meters per second.
Houston Station on 2, primary range 154.30, on camera 9, block Bravo. Light is within the corridor. Vehicle size appears to be the same as the outline. The light is offset 1 vehicle width starboard and half vehicle width forward of the center line. The circle is offset 1 vehicle width starboard. Camera 3, block Bravo. Light is within the corridor. Vehicle size unknown. Light is offset 3 vehicle widths port and 2 vehicle widths forward. The circle is offset 1 vehicle width starboard.
And we copy all. We're checking.
So what you're hearing is Randy Bresnik aboard the International Space Station working with Paolo Nespoli, reading off some of that telemetry data that you were seeing from the Cuckoo workstation with the green numbers around the screen. They were reading off some of the telemetry that they were getting, making sure it matches everything that was expected from the ground control teams. As Cygnus approaches the International Space Station, departing 135 meters away from the International Space Station, approaching at about 0.2 meters per second. The next check mark will be at the 30-meter holding point. At this rate, the Cygnus cargo vehicle and the International Space Station should be seeing the light of the sun soon as it crosses the terminator line. The International Space Station, now about 253 statute miles above the Earth, now passing over Canada on an easterly course, about to head southeast towards the Atlantic Ocean, where it will cross the terminator line there into an orbital sunrise. Right here, the view you're getting is the view from the end of the station's robotic arm. The camera's at the end of that arm, facing right out towards Cygnus as it approaches the International Space Station. 123 meters and closing.
And station on 2, we think that Block Bravo call is within family, and we continue to expect it to converge as we get closer.
Copies. We'll give you another Block Bravo at 100, unless you want it sooner.
100 meters works for us.
That exchange between the Capcom here, Mission Control Houston, Kathy Bolt communicating with Randy Bresnik, who is up on the International Space Station working right next to Paolo Nespoli at the controls of the station's robotic arm. He's just reading off some of the telemetry data that he's saying from his workstation. They have confirmed that everything kind of matches up right now. Everything's looking pretty good. The next thing they'll wait for is a status report at the 100-meter mark. Now about 10 meters away from that, the Cygnus vehicle sitting 110 meters away from the International Space Station, approaching at about 0.15 meters per second.
Station on 2. Primary range is 100.49er. Camera 9, Block Bravo. Light is within the corridor. Vehicle size is the same as the outline. The light is offset one vehicle width, half vehicle width starboard, and one half vehicle width forward. The circle is offset one vehicle width starboard. Camera 3, Block Bravo. Light is within the corridor. Vehicle size is the same as the outline. Light is offset 2 vehicle widths port and 1.5 vehicle widths forward. The circle is offset 1 vehicle width starboard.
And we copy all. Just one clarification. Can you confirm when you're calling forward and aft that you're talking length of the vehicle and not width of the vehicle?
I'm talking width of the vehicle at all times.
We copy the width of the vehicle at all times.
The International Space Station, about 252 statute miles above the Earth, just passing north of Maine on a southeasterly course, towards the Atlantic Ocean. We're starting to see some illumination from the sun as it passes the terminator line into an orbital sunrise. You'll start seeing the view here of the Cygnus cargo vehicle start to light up. The vehicle itself crossing that 100-meter mark. Now at about 78 meters away from the International Space Station. Cygnus now beautifully illuminated as the International Space Station crosses just over Nova Scotia right now, about to head over the Atlantic Ocean again on a southeasterly course. Those ultraflex solar arrays in the back there glistening that famous gold color. Cygnus about 72 meters away from the International Space Station. So far, everything looking nominally for the Cygnus cargo vehicle as it approaches the International Space Station, slowing down a bit to about 0.07 meters per second. Sitting at about just over, at this point, 60 meters away from the International Space Station. 30 meters to go to that 30-meter holding point. That's the next stop on Cygnus's journey. From there, ground teams will assess whether or not to depart the 30-meter holding point and go to the capture position. View Views of the Earth now starting to illuminate as the International Space Station passes over the North Atlantic Ocean, crossing the terminator line into an orbital sunrise. The International Space Station 251 statute miles above the Earth right now. Cygnus continues to close in on the International Space Station 53 meters now away from the International Space Station towards that 30-meter holding point.
Station on 2. Primary range 50.48. Camera 9, Block Bravo. Light is within the corridor. Vehicle size is the same as the outline. Light is offset approximately half vehicle width starboard. 0 forward. Circle is offset half vehicle width starboard. Camera 3, Block Bravo. Lights within the corridor. Vehicle size is the same as the outline. Light is offset 1 vehicle width port. 0 forward. Circles offset quarter vehicle width starboard.
We copy, and that sounds like a nominal Block Bravo call. And just for your awareness, we are about 10 minutes behind on the timeline. Expect a capture about 10 minutes beyond what we show on the timeline right now.
Copy that. And if you got time for the opening of the window, please.
Checking.
So you were hearing Randy Bresnik aboard the International Space Station. He's sitting next to Paolo Nespoli at the controls of the station's robotic arm. Bresnik was just reading off some of the telemetry data at the 50-meter mark.
Capture point, then that's when you'll be able to open the window.
So again, good telemetry data being reported from orbit. Randy Bresnik working next to Paolo Nespoli, reporting some of the telemetry data that he's seeing from aboard. Cygnus now about 40 meters away from the station, heading towards that 30-meter capture point.
And Station Houston on 2, clarify that call. The capture window is actually open right now. It will close at GMT 10:48.
You copy closure of the capture window 10:48.
So just a confirmation call from Kathy Bolt, again, Capcom here in Mission Control, talking with Randy Bresnik aboard the International Space Station. Kathy Bolt reported a little bit of a delay in the schedule for today. Now we're shooting for just around 4 a.m. Central Time for a capture. We'll keep you posted along the way. But that confirmation she was also reading was the capture window time, which is plenty of time. That capture window closes sometime around the ballpark of 4:48 Central Time today. It's just if anything were to be delayed, this is the window they have to capture the Cygnus cargo vehicle and bring it on board the International Space Station. Now, shooting for a capture time of around 4 a.m. Central Time. Again, we'll keep you updated. The International Space Station now in an orbital daytime 250 statute miles above the Earth over the Atlantic Ocean. Less than 5 meters away from the holding point, actually closer to about 34 meters away from the International Space Station. Rate is slowing down just a bit, now about 0.04 meters per second, closing in on that 30-meter holding point. From then, again, ground teams will assess whether or not to move towards that captured position. So Paolo Nespoli aboard the International Space Station, now working with Randy Bresnik, can use the station's robotic arm to capture the Cygnus cargo vehicle.
And station on 2, we want you to confirm 30-meter hold and set up for capture per step 6 in 1.102.
Station copies. We can verify a hold. Try range 30.52. Secondary range 30.52.
Copy all.
Houston, we're stepping into step 3 of 1.110.
Copy and concur.
So confirmation from Kathy Bolt here in Mission Control, Capcom relaying information to the crew on the ISS. Randy Bresnik making the calls right now to Kathy Bolt, and the ground team's working with Paolo Nespoli at the controls of the robotic arm, confirming that the Cygnus is holding at the 30-meter holding point, everything looking nominal so far. Ground team's now going through and deciding the go, no go for departing that 30-meter point and starting its approach to its capture position. And that's about just about somewhere in the ballpark of 10, 12 meters away from the International Space Station. That allows the robotic arm to go down and grab the vehicle.
Houston Station on 2, step 3.2 of 1.110. Crew is ready for Cygnus approach to capture point.
And Houston copies. Station Houston on 2 for Comrade regarding S1 lower outboard pan and tilt. We would like to see that set to match what is called out in step 3.1. We think you'll get a better view with that pan and tilt setting.
Two copies.
Flight controllers just flip the camera to its to get a better view of the station's robotic arm and Cygnus. Again, Cygnus holding at about 30 meters away from the station. You can see the tip of the station's robotic arm there sort of toward the center of your screen. That's where Cygnus is heading next after the go for departing the 30-meter holding point. It'll go just about around the range of 10 meters away from the International Space Station, about 10 or 12. That'll get it into its position almost perfectly, so Paolo Nespoli just has to push the controls forward, and right there you can see the latching end effector will grab the Cygnus vehicle, and right now we're looking at a capture time just around the vicinity of 4 a.m. Central Time. Still, we'll keep you updated if anything changes, but again, 4 a.m. Central Time for that capture time. In the meantime, we'll wait for the call to depart the 30-meter holding point.
And station on 2, Cygnus is ready to proceed to the capture point. You can expect approach to resume shortly.
Station copies.
So with that confirmation from Capcom Kathy Bolton here in Mission Control Houston, all the flight controllers here and in Dulles are go to go into its capture position. We'll start seeing the Cygnus start inching slowly towards its capture position just a few meters away from the International Space Station.
Cygnus has resumed approach to the capture point. Monitor approach within 30 meters per step 7 of 1.102. The crew is primed to issue retreat if the pry range is less than 6 meters.
Station copies.
So with that, the departure has begun. Cygnus now inching closer and closer to the International Space Station at a rate of about 0.04 meters per second. It'll be a slow journey, but it'll get there. She was also confirming if it's within 6 meters, that's a little too close for comfort, so the crew members have the ability to issue an abort if something like that happens, but right now shooting for its capture position about 10 or 12 meters away from the International Space Station. So a short loss in communication here, should be regaining it shortly so we can get some good views of Cygnus.
Is right within the corridor. Size is the same. No offset. And circles, no offset. Camera 3, the same.
We copy, and that's a good report.
So that was Randy Bresnik reporting a quick status update at about the 23 meter mark. Everything on his end looking good, all of the telemetry lining up. As Cygnus makes its slow approach to its capture position, about 10 or 12 meters away from the International Space Station at a rate of about just over 0.03 meters per second. So Cygnus just about to pass the 20-meter mark, heading slowly towards to go right in front of the station's robotic arm. Once in position, it will hold there and allow Paolo Nespoli at the controls of the station's robotic arm in the cupola workstation. Has a good view of all the action happening here right now. He'll use those controls to go ahead and go in for capturing the Cygnus cargo vehicle. Right now the goal is 4 a.m. Central Time for that capture time. Again, we'll keep you updated as that changes. The International Space Station is still 255 statute miles above the Earth, still over the South Atlantic Ocean, about to cross the southern border of South Africa, right at the right where the South Africa meets the South Atlantic Ocean, on a southeasterly course towards the Indian Ocean. You can start seeing the western coast of Namibia and soon South Africa coming up here shortly. Cygnus passing 15 meters away from the International Space Station, now in view of the station, the robotic arm, the camera at the tip of the robotic arm. Slowing down the approach rate to about 0.03, now less than 0.03 meters per second as it gets closer to that capture position. Once holding there, we'll go around the room here in Mission Control Houston, do a poll to see if we are go for capture. Paolo Nespoli aboard the International Space Station will use the station's robotic arm. He'll be at the controls there to capture the Cygnus cargo vehicle. Now passing 13 meters away from the station, about 12.5 now. You can see the west coast of South Africa, International Space Station, 257 statute miles above the Earth. Cygnus cargo vehicle just over 12 meters away from that. Station just about to pass over Cape Town, South Africa. Cygnus now right in front of the station's robotic arm, holding it around 12 meters away from the International Space Station, awaiting confirmation from ground teams here that it has indeed locked into its capture position. Then we'll poll for the go, no go to capture the Cygnus cargo vehicle today. The International Space Station, 259 statute miles above the Earth, just south off the coast of South Africa, heading on a southeasterly course towards the Indian Ocean.
And station on 2, confirm capture point hold per step 8 and 1.102.
Copies. Step 8 in work. Primary range 12.04, secondary range 12.06. We do confirm CP hold. HCP lighting. Abort arm illuminated. Retreat arm illuminated. Hold arm illuminated. Free drift arm illuminated. Strobe light on illuminated. We have LiDAR lock, command path, and proximal lights illuminated as well.
And we copy all.
Also verify the grapple fixture is stable within the capture volume. The dot is within the outer corridor of the nested corridors, and there is no limit check violations displayed to us.
Good copy.
Houston Station, we capture conditions are confirmed. We like the lighting. Crew's ready for Cygnus capture.
Okay, we copy. Stand by.
Everything looking good from the perspective of the astronauts aboard the International Space Station. Randy Bresnick reporting some good telemetry as the Cygnus vehicle holds at about 12 meters away from the International Space Station. The station's robotic arm in position. Now just going through the room here in Mission Control Houston for the go, no go to proceed with capture.
And station Houston on 2, go for Cygnus capture sequence. Step 4 of 1.110, Cygnus capture, and begin monitoring the back away cue card.
Station copies. Step 4.1 in work.
So everything looking good to be go for capture today. The crew on board the International Space Station flipping the switch to take control of the station's robotic arm and start moving it into in towards the Cygnus cargo vehicle for capture today. Looking at a capture time a few minutes past the hour today. We'll be reading off some key points as we close in towards the capture point. Cygnus still holding about 12 meters away from the International Space Station. The crew members Paolo Nespoli just
On to commencing approach.
Copy.
Paolo Nespoli just configuring the station's robotic arm to get into position for capture today. Motion confirmed of the station's robotic arm, now closing in on the Cygnus cargo vehicle. Three meters away from capture. 2.5 meters. Now 2 meters away, everything looking good so far. Now over the pin. In the capture envelope. With that, the carriage is driving. And driving the final commands to capture the Cygnus vehicle 4:04 a.m. Central Time today over the southeastern Indian Ocean just southwest of Australia. And a beautiful shot of the station's robotic arm capturing the Cygnus cargo vehicle on his OA-8 mission. Again, 4:04 a.m. Central Time for that confirmed capture time. The Cygnus cargo vehicle flying over the South Indian Ocean, 200 and just over 260 miles above the Earth. Now reporting a good tension and the latches are driving. And everything looks latched.
And station on 2, we see a good capture. Great job, guys.
Copy. Cygnus capture complete. Go for Cygnus post-capture reconfig. Here's M1. And the 2-day release.
Vehicle itself, the SS Gene Cernan. Beautiful capture and great coordination from the teams at Orbital ATK in Dulles, Virginia, and here at NASA in Houston, Texas, at the Johnson Space Center. Great coordination for a capture of the Cygnus vehicle OA-8 mission at 4:04.